Hi there, everyone. Um, Welcome to our community connection event today. This is Dogs Say What, Canine Communication. And we're going to be talking about canine body language, how to interpret it, and we're also going to be talking about our own influence on our dog's behavior and how we communicate with them. So I'm really glad to have you all here. I'm going to go ahead and start with just introducing myself. My name is Robin, and I'm a member of the training team here at the shelter. So I have a bachelor's degree in zoology. I've been studying animal behavior and training in both wild and domesticated animals for about 5 years now. I'm really passionate about animal training and also about public outreach. So I'm really excited to be able to do these community connection events with you all and to pass on this really valuable information about dogs and how they communicate. My supervisor, Donna, is also here on the screen. You'll see them in some videos later on in the presentation. All of these logos at the bottom of the screen here are different organizations that we're affiliated with as a team. So it's basically just a lot of different organizations that say that we know what we're doing when it comes to training. We've got certified trainers on our team, and that we're really focused on continuing education and practicing this ethical and science-based dog training. All right, so just a little bit before we really get into it, this class is being recorded, so just keep that in mind as we go through it. I ask that you hold any questions until I ask for them. You can, if you have questions and you are afraid that you're going to forget them, you can go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll go ahead and look at those when I come to the question slides. There'll also be a couple of sections where I'm asking you to give me some input. You're welcome to do that if you're comfortable. If not, don't worry about it. I'll just keep talking, so no worries there. Important things to note, you guys came in muted and without your videos, and I ask that you just keep yourselves muted and keep those videos off, just to kind of limit the amount of bandwidth that we have going. We want everyone to have a really smooth presentation. So that being said, I'm going to turn off my video now that you've all kind of seen me and I've introduced myself. And we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the shelter. So our community at the Santa Fe Animal Shelter is a life-saving community. And that means that animals that come to us are really given the best chance that they can to get adopted. We're really lucky to have a great behavior team on site at the shelter. They work with all of our behaviorally challenged dogs using some of the tools that we're going to talk about in today's presentation. So really focusing in on dog body language and how dogs are communicating. We're really lucky to be a part of the shelter that has such great community support. So if you volunteer or donate or foster, adopt, anything like that, you're making this happen. So thank you. We really, really appreciate that. I also want to give a huge thank you to Purina for making community connection events like this possible through their generous financial support. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. So these are some of the topics that we're going to be covering in today's presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit about what communication really is, the different types of communication that we can see from our dogs, and then we're going to focus in on dog body language, how we translate that, and then also how we influence that. So it's really important when we're talking about communication, right, to think that it's a two-way street. So that's why we're going to kind of talk both ways. So communication is really all about information exchange, right? You can see in this picture, all of these dogs are sniffing each other. They're interested in what's going on. They're exchanging information. We behave and communicate in certain ways because that influences the behavior of other animals, right? So as humans, right, that's why we're communicating. We want to influence the people around us. We want to express ourselves. Our dogs do the same, right? They do what works for them to influence the others around them. Communication is genetically encoded, but it's also somewhat socially learned, right? So some of what our dogs do will be sort of hardwired in, and other types of behaviors and communication, they might be learning from other dogs. So if any of you have multi-dog households, you might have seen your dogs learning from each other, right? If one dog knew how to sit for a treat, the other dog might pretty quickly learn that that's really effective communication, right? You sit down and you get a treat from a human. That's great. I'll do that too. So it's definitely something that can be learned and can change throughout our dog's life as well. Communication really depends on the context in which the behavior occurs. So for just a couple of human examples for this, something like a slap on the back from a friend is going to be really different from a slap on the back from a stranger, right? And if someone were to smile in response to something sad that you said, that might be interpreted kind of antagonistically, right? Why are they smiling right now? That's really inappropriate, right? So the context really does matter, and it communicates something different in those different contexts. So with our dog's behavior, it's really, really important to always be considering the context. Even something simple like what you see in this dog pictured here, right? When he's standing up, you can tell his tail's tucked under, he's nervous, he's afraid, he's kind of crouched, right? But when he's lying down, and that's the same bed in the same situation, right? You can't tell. He doesn't look as scared in that one. He might just seem kind of shy, right? So that context even is a really big change. So definitely keeping that awareness, even as we're going through this presentation, right? But definitely while you're dealing with your own dogs. So there's a lot of different kinds of communications that our dogs use on a daily basis. Sniffing is the really obvious one, right? Dogs have an incredible sense of smell. They're able to get information about other dogs' ages, their health, their emotional states, and probably more than we even know, right? All just from a simple sniff. So this is a huge part of dog communication, but it's also one of the least important in our human communication, right? We don't think about how things are smelling, and we don't have a very good sense of smell, especially in comparison to our dogs. So this is something that we might struggle with understanding. But that being said, it's really important to think about the additional information that our dogs are getting from their environment, or from other dogs that we're just completely missing out on as an extra context for their behaviors. So, our dogs might be distracted by a smell that we could never smell. So really keeping that in mind, just in your interactions, there's a whole extra layer that we're just really not aware of as humans. Vocalization, right? Um, this is a dog here that's pretty upset, right? Working at the people who are filming, right? Who probably aren't those that dog's guardian or anything like that. They're just people filming this dog, right? So a dog barking out of aggression, right, or fear is going to sound a little bit different than a dog barking out of excitement. And as you get to know an individual dog, we can usually start picking up on that difference. So that's something to think about. There's all kinds of different dog vocalizations, right? It's not just barking. There's whines and the different noises like huskies make, right? That have kind of no names at all, but so there's all these different types of vocalizations that they might use to try to communicate with us. And we're not going to focus in on that in this presentation, but different vocalizations will often accompany some of the body language that we're going to be discussing. So definitely being aware of the fact that there are different types of vocalizations, and that again, in different contexts or at different times, they might mean different things. So definitely paying attention to kind of how your dog communicates with their vocalizations will serve you very well. All right, so the next type of communication is communication through touch. So in this picture, you can see that this dog is leaning against their owner. Dogs use leaning and other types of touch or proximity to communicate different parts of their emotions, right? So a lean might mean that they're worried about the surroundings, kind of like you can tell in this picture, right? That dog seems to be a little bit uncomfortable, is leaning against their person, hoping for support. But a lean might mean pet me please, or something else like that. A more excited and happy dog might be leaning against you just to say, you're a safe place, right? Or I do want pets. So those are all different things that a lean can mean. And then just lying down in proximity, right, to another animal or a human, that can be a sign of trust and affection, right? So being aware of kind of what your dog is doing in the space, how they're, communicating with their whole body and with that sense of touch. So this is the part of communication that we're going to be focusing on throughout the rest of this presentation, and that's body language, right? Body language is a visual aspect of communication that, as humans, right, we're very sight oriented. So this is a little bit easier for us to understand from our dogs. So how our dogs communicate, right? They don't speak English. They don't have any other way to communicate than through their bodies. So basically what we're talking about when we're talking about body language, we're looking at reading a dog's body, translating it like a book, right? Translating their expressions, how tense they are, the posture that they're standing in, or how they're moving, right? All of those things are going to be really important to consider. Um, all right, so does anyone have any questions about these different types of communication with dogs? We're going to go into more detail in a little bit about how to read their dog body language next. But if anyone has any questions now, you're welcome to unmute and ask them or put them in the chat. All right. Okay, so now what we're going to do is go through a few slides on different examples of dog body language and what those communicate to us. So again, it's important to keep in mind what we talked about before about the context being really important, right? Communication is context dependent. Still, the following generalizations can be really helpful in understanding what your dog is trying to tell you. So here we've got a relaxed dog. Some of the key features to pay attention to when you're looking for signs of relaxation are things like soft eyes, right? There's no little wrinkles around the eyes. They're not too squinty. They're just relaxed. And then the ears are relaxed here in this dog with the pointy ears. It might be a little bit harder to tell. But with the pointy eared dogs, usually they'll kind of be out at an angle when they're relaxed. If they're alert, they might be more on top of their head or straight up, right? So paying attention to how the ears look. If you have floppy-eared dogs, their ears would just be down and relaxed instead of perked forward, right? So you can see those triangles. Now in this relaxed dog again too, the open mouth is really telling, right? So when our dogs are relaxed and happy, oftentimes their mouth will be open, the corners of their mouth will be back pretty far, and they'll be relaxed. So there's no real tension in their lips. The tongue's kind of lolling out in a happy pant, right? All of those things are things to look at. So definitely, when you're looking for relaxation, we're looking for soft body language, no tension in the neck, right? No tension in the rest of the body, just a nice relaxed dog. So some play. Playful behaviors are really fun and obvious in certain ways. So you can see the dogs in this video, they've got really wiggly bodies. Their mouths are open, their lips are all loose. They're just kind of grabbing each other, rolling around. You can see there's a lot of exaggerated movements, right? In this interaction, you can see the dog closest to the camera is having a good time, but that dog in the back was not as loose, right? It was a little bit tense. But here again, you can see these are very loose, happy dogs. They're mouthing at each other, but they're not, biting. They're not gonna break any skin. They're just having a good time with each other. Um, so those are all good things to look for as far as play goes. And that was more relaxed play, but there's also a more energetic play, right? And so in this interaction, you'll see play bows hopping around. They've still got kind of loose bodies, but they're a little bit tenser just because they're in motion, right? And you've got the nice wagging tails. There's also something that is called the rocking horse gait, that you'll kind of see as the dogs move around. They're a little bit just bouncier than usual, right? They don't have to run like that. They're just having a good time, and so they've got kind of that rocking gait as they move. Role reversal is a really important thing to talk about when you're watching playing dogs. If they're playing chase, one dog chases the other dog, and then the other dog turns around and chases them. That's a sign of good play, right? So this dog is being a little bit intense, the younger dog, right? The red colored one chasing after, and not necessarily allowing for that role reversal. So just when you're looking at your dog's play, this is a great time to observe body language, right? Because they're showing so much, but it's also happening really fast. So that's something to be aware of too, right? Play is exaggerated and slower usually than any sort of more intense dog communication. So it's a really good way to practice recognizing good play behaviors, those soft expressions and happy play. All right, so this dog here is a great example of a dog who's trying to communicate appeasement with her person, right? You can see that her ears are back kind of against her head, right? They're not loose, relaxed, and floppy. They're back against her head. Her front paw is lifted up. Her tail is down but wagging, and her eyes are just a little bit squinty, and you can see that her mouth is a little bit tight. And what I mean by that is that the corners of her mouth are much further forward than, say, in the dogs that were playing in the last video, or that relaxed dog in the first picture, right? You can see her mouth is closed, and the corners of her lips are further forward. And that could be because she's maybe about to lick at the person, or she might be a little bit uncertain about approaching. So it can be hard to tell from still photos, but you can still see that a lot is going on in this dog's body language that is coming across very differently from the other dogs that we've seen so far, right? A little bit more tension, the ears being back, the mouth being closed, right? Those are all really important things to note when your dog is interacting with you. All right, this is an example of a dog that is stressed. You can see that this dog's ears are back and kind of plastered down to the side. Their eyes are averted from the person with the camera, right? They're looking away. Their posture is pretty crouched down, and they're close to the ground, and their lips are tense and slightly puckered. So you can see if you look at here, and I'll bring my cursor up just so you can see right here, you can see kind of there's a little bit of tension there, right? And in the other dogs that we were looking at, the lips would be kind of looser, right? Hanging down. This is a breed that has those loose lips. And so seeing them so tense like that is a really telling sign. They're a bit puckered up, and he's very, very uncomfortable here. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about stress and fear behaviors in dogs and what those can look like, because some of them can be pretty subtle. So, here we have what's called the canine ladder of aggression. So, you can see that dog body language involving stress kind of runs along a continuum. So, you're looking at low stress signals, like low level stress signals at the bottom in that green section, all the way up to the aggressive biting and things like that. It's really important to keep in mind that this is a continuum, right? So a lot of dogs are aggressive out of fear or discomfort, or from just not being listened to at those earlier stages. So what we're going to go ahead and start with is just talking about the behaviors that are shown here in green. These are subtle signals of stress. These signals communicate unease, discomfort, the beginnings of fear. So something as simple as just looking away from you or licking their lips, yawning, any of those things can tell you a lot about a dog's state of mind, that they're nervous, afraid. Maybe they've just been in a very stressful situation, and so they're licking their lips or yawning afterwards, right? They're trying to communicate that they're uncomfortable. So in those situations, it's really important to get them out of the situation that is scaring them, or to give them space if you're too close to them and they're a bit shy. And this is a real dog example of just how subtle these sorts of signals can be. So here you have a dog with their ears out to the side in a classic example of what's called airplane ears. And airplane ears can communicate discomfort or uncertainty or conflicted emotions. So you can see that this dog is also looking away from the person behind the camera, right? Their mouth is pretty tight, not as tight as the dog in that appeasing picture, but still, tighter than you would expect for a dog on a sandy beach, right? It's probably pretty warm. It's strange to see that their mouth isn't open and that they're not panting. So that shows some discomfort. And then their eyes are just a little bit tense. There's a little bit of a wrinkle kind of over the top of them, if you can see that right about there. And there's just a little bit more tension in kind of the corners of the eyes. They're a little bit squintier than what we saw in that relaxed dog image earlier. So these are all, again, really subtle indicators that this dog is not that comfortable. All right, so next we're going to talk about the body language that's shown here in yellow. And these are body language signals that we like to call very solidly above threshold. Now, threshold is an imaginary line we talk about where a dog crosses over from being relaxed or alert but calm to where we start to see those signs of fear and discomfort that we were just looking at. So even those signals that were technically in the green, right, those are still behaviors that can really easily escalate into these yellow behaviors or into the reds, right, those high level aggressive behaviors. So it's really important to recognize those subtle signals before they even get to this yellow level. So here you can see a dog exhibiting a hard stare. So their eyes are intense, almost glaring. You can see a little bit of the whites around their eyes, right? And then you can also see that this dog has that same puckered, tense mouth as the Weimaraner wearing the witch's hat in that other picture that we looked at. And you can also see that this dog's ears are pretty much gone back into their head, right? They're plastered back. You can barely see them. So this is a dog who is giving very clear warning signs that they are upset, and they can escalate into those more aggressive behaviors at any moment, right? So really looking at the stare that you're seeing there in combination with those puckered lips and the ears back, it's definitely warning you to give some space. So other yellow level body language signs are things like standing crouched and with their tails tucked under, like we saw from that dog in one of the first few slides. Also things like moving in sort of a creeping crouch away from you, any stalking or hard stares like in this picture. and things like rolling belly up with their legs lifted. There's also something called the clown face, and this is different from the play face, right, that we saw in the earlier play videos, but it's just very subtly different. So instead of loose and floppy lips with an open mouth, the lips are going to be tight, and the tongue is usually going to be still mostly in the mouth instead of lolling out. So if you're getting to that level of stress and fear from your dog, you're well on your way to trouble. So the best thing to do is to give your dog, again, plenty of space or disengage from any interaction they might be having with another person or another dog, or any sort of situation where they're really uncomfortable. So next we're going to talk about these behaviors in red. And these are what everyone really thinks of as aggressive behaviors, right? Things like biting, snapping, growling, right? All of those things. But again, these sorts of behaviors are really often fear-based, and they can be avoided by just listening to and responding appropriately to the green and yellow behaviors that we already talked about. So this is an example of what aggression can look like, right? We see that the teeth are bared. That's a really obvious one. The mouth is gaping, but those lips, the corners of the lips are forward. So you see this here. This is a forward lip, right? If this dog was more relaxed and just had their mouth kind of open in a grin, the lips would be back here. They wouldn't be so tight. You can see there's little wrinkles around the nose, right? That's a very, very tense position to be in. And you can also see the whites around this dog's eyes are showing, right? And their ears are back. So this dog is really unhappy with the handling that's happening here. And you can see on the human side, they're not actually even reacting to what the dog is doing. So this is clearly a breach of boundaries where the dog is very, very uncomfortable, but the human is still handling them. So this is definitely, something to be aware of. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we really influence our dog's behavior later on in the presentation. But it's pretty clear that this dog is just not being listened to. Okay, so we just covered a lot of different body language and what underlying emotions that those different things can signify. So does anyone have any questions about the ladder of aggression or stress signals or any of the body language that I described earlier? You're welcome to put your questions in chat or to unmute if you have any questions you'd like to ask. All right. Well, if you think of anything, you're welcome to put it in the chat. All right, so in this next section, we're gonna just have a bit of practice going through different dog pictures, pointing out different body language signals that we might see that gives us a hint as to what is going on in the picture. So here, I would like to know if you think this dog is maybe stressed and showing that clown face that we talked about earlier, or is this dog just simply panting and hot? You're welcome to put your guesses in the chat if you're comfortable with that, or if you think that you know which one this is. But I'd love to hear kind of what you're thinking from the signals that you're seeing in this picture. All right, Mina says hot. Yeah, that's the right answer. And so there's no real tension in her face. Her tongue's lolling out. You can see her lips are pretty loose, and she's just hot and on a walk, right, lying in the sand, taking a rest. And so that is perfect. So well done on that one. Clown face and panting can sometimes be difficult to differentiate with unfamiliar dogs in particular. So again, paying attention to all the context around your dog when you're translating their body language is going to be really important. All right, is this dog relaxed or worried? So again, you can put your answers in the chat if you think you have them. All right. Yeah, definitely worried. Super worried. Yes, that is correct. Yeah, you can see that dog is looking away from the person. Their mouth is really tight. You can see the whites of their eyes. Their ears are back. Right. This is not a comfortable dog, and probably they would prefer that the human stop petting them in that way. Right. So good job with that one. Now in this next one, I'm just going to ask you about what body language signals you see from the dog in this next photo and what they're trying to communicate. So again, you can write in the chat as you notice different signals to be aware of. All right, so go ahead, and if you see any certain, of those different body language signals that we've been talking about, anything about this dog's face or their posture, right, anything like that, you're welcome to go ahead and put that in the chat. Yeah, backing away and the whites of its eyes are showing. Tight mouth, that's a good one. Yeah, this is definitely a dog who's being pretty cautious, right? We're not comfortable in this situation. Yeah, the stiff arms, really, really good. Yeah, this is a dog that is very tense, pulling away from that interaction as much as they can, right, with the space that the human is giving them. And really, you can see that tension all throughout the neck, the tight mouth. You're really right about that. See, the lips are coming forward, and those ears are back just a little bit. So this is a dog who is either very conflicted about this or very, very uncomfortable. And it was interesting going through the stock photos that I was looking through to find pictures of dogs. Most of the dogs that I found were in uncomfortable positions like that, whereas the humans might be having a good time in the pictures. So yeah, you guys did a really great job of recognizing all of those different signals that this dog is giving. It's also important to note that this dog in particular, right, very small, has no space to move away if that's what he wanted to do. So he's put into a situation where his discomfort, the only way he can communicate that is through his body language. That could escalate very, very easily since he's not allowed to move away. All right, does anyone have any questions at all about how to identify the different behaviors and what they communicate here? And I know I got a question earlier from Carissa, so I'll answer that one as well. So Carissa says, my dog has some aggression issues on the leash. If I'm walking behind her, how can I watch for signs of fear and anxiety as we walk? Yeah, that's a great question. So what you're going to be looking for on a walk is things like the stiffening of her body, right? If she is walking in kind of loose movements, right? A relaxed dog is going to be kind of loose and floppy on a walk versus a dog who's a little bit tenser, right? And so really watching the tension in her body. Also, if she starts, if she stops moving, that can be an indicator as well, right? That she's seen something, and then that potential for a little bit of aggression goes up, right? They'll stiffen, they might hold still. You might see her back legs anchor as her front legs move forward if it's kind of more fear-based aggression, or any of those sorts of different behaviors. If your dog is walking, too far ahead of you, it's really a good idea for you to be watching the environment around you too, looking for signs of the triggers that might set your dog off. So there can be all kinds of things, and you're probably more familiar with them than I am. But definitely, keeping an eye out. And if you see something that you think, oh, my dog is going to definitely react to this, just turning around before she sees it would be ideal, right? Getting out of there before she gets into that state where you're noticing those sorts of behaviors. But yeah, I definitely think paying attention to her posture and the tension in her body is going to be really important. And also, keeping her as much as possible nearby, right? So she's not getting too far forward away from you, so that you are able to, if you need to, kind of get a handle and move away from that situation. But that's a really great question because we can't always see our dog's face in those sorts of situations. So yeah, really looking for, if you can, even just being able to see kind of the whites of her eyes might be a good indicator that she's getting too excited as well. Yeah, and I definitely see, Carissa, that that's what you've been trying to do, and that it can be really difficult. And I completely understand and agree with you. It's hard when you have a dog that's a bit reactive or aggressive on the leash, and it can definitely be a difficult situation to be in. So yeah, really paying attention and being vigilant of the environment, and then also of her sort of escalating behaviors. If she ever does have a sort of aggressive encounter, just ending the walk as soon as you can after that, because once they get stressed, it's really hard for them to kind of bring it back down to a place of relaxation. So keeping that in mind too. Stress kind of builds on itself. So like we talked about with that ladder of aggression, right? It can escalate, and the more stressors you have, the easier it is to escalate. So definitely, if you're starting to see that tension, or even just like additional excitement, anything like that, thinking about turning around and heading back home, just to make it easier on your dog and on you, of course, too. Yeah, good question. Are there any other questions about any of the behaviors that we have seen so far in the presentation? All right. Okay, so next what we're going to talk about is how humans influence our dog's behavior. So communication is a two-way street, right? We just spent a lot of time talking about how our dogs are communicating with us, but it's also really important to consider what our actions mean to them. So our actions can come across in a lot of different ways, but I want to focus on these sorts of this dichotomy of encouraging versus discouraging our dogs, right? So you can also think of this as actions that build confidence and trust in our dogs, and actions that might diminish them. So one of the ways that we often discourage our dogs from expressing themselves and communicating is by punishing them when they do something we don't like. So something like barking, right, or chewing on furniture. We might say, "No, stop," or we might just yell at them, whatever it is, right? What a dog views as punishing might not always be a physical punishment, right, like hitting them or anything like that. So, for example, scolding can scare some dogs, but then is entirely ineffective with other dogs, right? So, scaring or intimidating our dogs in any way can lead to a lack of trust, and can also cause behavioral problems down the line. Because if we're punishing them for expressing themselves, right, if they're growling or snapping or anything like that, and we punish them for that, they learn instead to just skip those warning signals and go straight to the bite, right? So that can definitely backfire if we try to punish or stop those expressions from our dogs. You can see some body language in this dog in this image, right? This is a dog that is very scared. So you can see the ears are back, right? We've got the lip licking going on. Definitely a tense mouth here. You can see the wrinkles around their eyes that are pretty squinty. And again, their posture, right? They're rolled onto their side. Their leg is lifted up. This is something that is communicating they're very uncomfortable, and they're quite afraid in this situation. So punishing our dogs isn't the only way to kind of erode that trust between us and our dogs. Denying them choice can also really impact our relationships negatively. So you can see the dog in this picture pretty clearly communicating that she is scared of the water that you can see in this upper left-hand corner here, right? She's leaning backwards. Her mouth is tight. You can see the edge of it just there. Her tail is down. She doesn't want to go any closer, but the person on the other end of the leash is pulling her closer. She doesn't have the option to move away. Um, so, so this is showing our dogs that we aren't paying attention to what they're trying to tell us, right? That we're just going to disregard it. So they might escalate their behaviors in order to be heard, right? Which again can result in pretty dangerous situations. On the other hand, they might just completely shut down and stop communicating with us at all. And that's not, the makings of a good relationship either. We want there to be communication and understanding between both of us. So what can we do to influence our dog's behavior in a positive way that shows them that we're willing to listen? So this is going to be a video of a dog named Porter who had never been inside of a house before. And Donna, the trainer in this video, is going to be trying to communicate a lack of threat with their body language and also really paying attention to the space that Porter needs. So I'm going to go ahead and play this for you.
You burping? You burping at me?
So you can see that Donna is here in a crouched position. When they move towards Porter, they moved backwards, right? So that wasn't very threatening at all. They're getting very small, and they're always approaching side on, never straight on with their body movements, because that can come across as intimidating to our dogs, right? That sort of front on pressure and staring them straight in the eye is scary and threatening. So Donna's being really careful to be as non-threatening, small, and friendly as possible. You can see Porter's reacting in sort of a conflicted way, right? He'll move forward and then move away. There's a lot of fidgeting, low tail wags, right, showing that he's excited but uncomfortable, right? So there's a lot of communication going on in this video from both the trainer and the dog, right? So throughout this, the trainer never moves towards the dog except for that one time moving backwards, right? And that's because moving towards a nervous dog again is quite intimidating and can add to their fear. So every movement that Donna makes in this video is there to communicate to Porter that he's safe and that he's listened to. So listening leads to trust from our dogs. So this is Porter after some work with that trainer and really being listened to and communicated with in a positive way. You can see he's quite relaxed, leaning into this person who is able to pet him, right? Even though in the previous video, Donna only got to maybe touch him once at the end. And you can see here in this video, Porter's got a lot of wiggly, happy, excited movements, right? This is a dog that is very happy. The tail wags are even with the back, which is a happier posture, right, than that sort of low tail wag that we were seeing in the previous video. So that is the power that communication and listening to our dogs can have, especially with the fearful ones. So we can have a really huge influence on our dogs by putting in the work to understand what they're trying to tell us. And not only can our body language communicate that we are non-threatening, but we can also use our body language to engage our dogs in play and fun behaviors too. So you can think about those play videos that we saw earlier in the presentation. So they were chasing each other, bouncing, using wiggly body movements and exaggerated gestures and things like that, all to communicate that it was just good fun. So we can mimic that. So in this video, I am trying to get my dog to play with me. And so you can see there's a difference in the body language that I'm showing. So I go from sort of hopping around and running and moving in a kind of weird crouched way, right? And she plays. And then as soon as I hold still and calm myself down, she calms down too. This is a really fun game to play with your dog. It's also really good practice, kind of making yourself fun. So I had to, get her to chase me there because she didn't move at first. And I did that by crouching lower down, moving faster, right? So there's all of these different ways of engaging with our dogs. And this can be, in the context of play, but it can also be used for things like, getting your dog to come with you. A dog doesn't want to approach somebody straight on because to them that's intimidating, right? So if we want them to move with us, we can just turn and move ourselves away, and that can encourage them to follow us. So sort of mimicking our dog's body language in order to communicate with them, right? And really thinking about how our body language is coming across to our dogs, because primate behavior, right, or human behavior is very different from dog behavior. A lot of our communication is different. So definitely being aware of how we're holding ourselves and how we're coming across to our dogs can communicate a lot of different things. So listening to our dogs and really adjusting our own behavior to influence theirs in positive ways can lead to happy and rewarding relationships. And this is something that we're all looking for with our dogs. So I definitely think, the foundation of communication, listening that goes both ways really makes for a rewarding relationship. And so if you are needing any additional information on this or other behavior topics, you're welcome to contact us at our behavior help desk. Also, after this email, after this presentation, we're gonna send an email, and that will just have some resources and information from this presentation. And so does anyone have any last questions here about canine communication, any of the videos or body language signals that we've seen? You're welcome to, again, type into chat or unmute yourself and ask any questions you might have.
Hi, this is Carissa. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi. So I was wondering, when my dog is playing with me, she really loves to play tug of war. And, she's about a year old. We adopted her in Albuquerque last summer. And she's a really great dog. She loves, loves, loves to play. But is there a line in play that crosses like to aggression, or is there any like form of play that would like make her more aggressive? Because sometimes when she's playing tug, she does look like she could just, tear my hand off.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's something that there's a lot of information out there. People will tell you all kinds of different things. I think in particular about tug of war. I think the important thing to note about a dog that really likes tug is that that feeling is satisfying to them in some way, right? And so getting that feeling out in play in a controlled context where they're just having a really good time and getting to use those muscles and the power of their jaws, right, in a way that feels good to them is generally pretty beneficial. Now, that being said, we don't want a tug of war game to escalate to this place where they're refusing to give the tug toy back and they're pulling you around, right? We want to have a little bit more of sort of a give and take with our tug games. We often talk about tug with rules, and that's basically teaching our dogs that they can drop the tug toy, and then as soon as they drop the tug toy, they can get the tug toy back, right? So it's just about breaking up the game a little bit, asking them to bring their energy levels down just slightly so that they can drop that toy, and then you can start it up again. And that's just kind of breaking it down for them, making it a little bit easier. I wouldn't say that playing tug of war results in increased aggressive tendencies. And in fact, it might be quite a healthy outlet as long as you're sort of incorporating those rules.
Okay. Yeah, I really appreciate that because she really loves to play. And we just didn't want to make anything worse because we are working through like the leash reactivity.
Hmm.
But then the only other thing that I have my husband here, we were talking about, she jumps a lot. And it's mostly when she's excited, like if we work from home, if we get up from our desk and we walk to the kitchen, she's jumping at us while we're walking. And, it's not great, but I know she's just excited. But we learned based on what you were describing that maybe like telling her no or like not to do that isn't maybe the best situation, but because we don't want to like stifle her emotions. But is there a way that you can think of that we could get her to not like jump when we're walking?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jumping is, probably one of the most common things that we see from our dogs, and that's because it's quite a natural behavior for them, right? You saw in the play videos, there was a lot of bouncing around. They also greet each other at the face a lot of the time, so they're trying to access our faces. And there's a lot of reasons why dogs might jump. And I think you're definitely on the right track with saying no might not be one, it might not be very effective, just because sometimes our dogs are just wanting attention from us, and even a no or a shove can seem like good attention to them, which might inadvertently be rewarding the jumping behaviors, right? So instead, kind of picking up on any patterns. When is it that she's getting to that level of excitement, and sort of planning around that, giving her something else to do, maybe a toy to put her mouth on or something to engage with, away from you, as maybe you're walking towards the kitchen or preparing a meal, anything like that, right, where you don't want her up on you. Kind of looking at that, teaching her something else to do instead and rewarding her for that. So keeping all 4 feet on the ground is pretty much the basics, with not jumping, and that can be a lot for some dogs, right? That's a lot to ask when a dog is very excited, to control themselves and bring themselves down to the ground. So rewarding her for if she approaches you and doesn't jump, right? Tossing a treat onto the ground, or giving her attention, right, for that sort of behavior. And if she's jumping on you in excitement, keeping your energy levels really calm, not twisting away or doing any quick movements, because that can engage her further, right? Like we
Right.
saw kind of in that play video at the end with me and my dog. So yeah, really thinking about how your body language is also maybe communicating something different to her, right? If you're turning away, moving away, she wants to follow and continue that interaction, versus if you just like hold still and entirely disengage, like that is not what she wants, right? And so that might have the effect of like, oh, I guess I'll stand on the ground, at which point you can reward, right? So it's kind of a two-way, managing the situation and then rewarding for what you do want to see there.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate the help.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we did just recently have a community connection event for jumpy and mouthy dogs. And so what I can do is I'll send a link to that in the follow-up email that I send, and also send a handout with the tug with rules, so that you can kind of watch the presentation if that's something that you want to do. Gives a little bit more information, goes into more detail, and then yeah, the handout for the tug game.
And thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, Carissa. Does anyone else have any questions about behaviors you've seen from your dog, or anything that we've talked about that you had any more questions about? All right. Well, I really appreciate all the questions, and the discussion. That's really really fun part of this for me, and definitely thank you for participating with those pictures. I really appreciate that, and I hope you all learned something in this presentation. So if you guys do end up having questions, you're welcome to reach out to us. We really really appreciate any and all questions, and we appreciate your support of the shelter. We hope that if you learned even one thing from this class that you found useful, please consider donating so that we can continue to provide these services free of charge to the community. And another big thank you to Purina again for making this and other community connection events possible. And again, I really appreciate all of your time here and hope you got a lot of good information. So thank you for supporting the Santa Fe Animal Shelter.